Welcome back to the FPL video and podcast. I'll be covering the top 20 midfielders in Fantasy Premier League, and there's going to be some great options that won't be discussed today, but I will cover them in future podcasts, such as the best budget players and best differentials. Keep your eyes peeled by smashing the like button of this video and getting it to over 200 likes, and also subscribing to my channel. Your support throughout the summer has been massively appreciated, and we're looking to get to new goals in the next couple of weeks as well. You'll be provided the ultimate Game Week 1 coverage before the Fantasy Premier League deadline and the new Premier League season begins. Let's get straight into this video and podcast though, and starting off with number 20 in my rankings of the best midfielders. Several Liverpool midfielders could have made it into the top 20, and Luis Diaz is one of two who makes the final cut. He's priced at 7.5 million once again. His ownership is just over 7%, and he had a decent output last season with 8 goals and 7 assists, and 94 shots is the standout statistic, and he always has very good shot volume, but I think his finishing can be better at times. He did get 142 FPL points in the last campaign, and Liverpool have great fixtures to start off. They got a 2-1 win over Arsenal in a recent friendly, and they look very sharp in pre-season. Luis Diaz hasn't featured yet since he went deep into the Copa America, reaching the final, and the same goes for the likes of Virgil van Dijk, Cody Gakpo, McAllister and Darwin Núñez. Those that reach the semi-finals and final of the Copa America or Euros are going to report back next week, and of course the same goes for Trent Alexander-Arnold. But Luis Diaz remains a fine option, and whilst Diogo Jota might be a differential worth looking at, I think Diaz will get more minutes over the course of the season. It might surprise you to see Ward-Prowse in this list, but I think he's a mega differential, and of course in the best differentials video and podcast I'll cover more options who have very low ownership, 10% and below. Some of them will have even lower than James Ward-Prowse, but I think he's a very consistent option who typically gets over 140 FPL points every single year. He can play as an attacking midfielder or also as a midfield pivot alongside a Soucek or Edson Alvarez, who is currently injured, and West Ham's opening fixtures aren't particularly great, so a Luis Diaz might be better to start the season, but I think over the course of the campaign, as we get to Game Week 38, I think Ward-Prowse could score more points than the likes of Luis Diaz and even Diogo Jota. But of course I do recognise that in Game Week 1, when we're selecting our teams, I think Ward-Prowse won't be at the top of our agendas, but it's worth highlighting him because he's so consistent. He'd done it for Southampton so many times, and he was quite solid for West Ham last season as well. 7 goals and 7 assists, 19 bonus points. He is an expert set piece taker, and 146 points is a very solid tally for his debut campaign at West Ham United. The opening 4 game weeks don't look great at all, especially Man City at home in Game Week 3, and the Hammers have really struggled against the Citizens in recent seasons. After Arsenal's 2-1 victory over Man United in a pre-season friendly, Mikel Arteta said that the likes of Declan Rice, Saliba and all these players that went deep into the Euros, they're going to be available by the end of this week and start training with the team. So Declan Rice could get good minutes in the friendlies against Bayer Leverkusen or Lyon in the Emirates Cup, but Rice will start from Game Week 1. He is as nailed on as you can get. 7 goals and 9 assists is his best ever tally in the Premier League, and he was taking set pieces for Arsenal with some very good crosses from corners. So I think Declan Rice can actually better these tallies going into next season, but it will be a tough ask because he typically plays as a defensive midfielder, and Arsenal are heavily linked with Mikel Merino, who will play more advanced than Declan Rice, and if that's the case, we won't see Rice playing as an 8 as often as we did in the last campaign, which was in several games in the Champions League and Premier League. His ownership is 5.4%, yet another differential covered in this video and podcast. He got 17 bonus points and 165 FPL points overall. I do recognise that the opening fixtures for Arsenal aren't great, and it will be difficult for Rice to better the goals, assists, bonus points and FPL points numbers, but I still think Declan Rice is one of the best midfielders in FPL. Originally, I was going to put Pascal Gross in this position, but he has moved to Borussia Dortmund and he's been linked with a move away throughout the summer, so that comes as no surprise there. Morgan Gibbs-White, though, is a solid choice in the heart of the Nottingham Forest midfield, and whilst you have alternatives in Hudson-Odoi and Elanga, I think Gibbs-White is more consistent in terms of minutes and also assists. He's got better underlying numbers, especially compared to Hudson-Odoi, who has terrible underlying stats, as I'll cover in future videos and podcasts, and Gibbs-White got 142 FPL points last season. He's another differential with 6.6% ownership, but he's getting close to that 10% mark. And with the opening three fixtures being as good as they are, I think more people will go towards a Gibbs White or Chris Wood to cover that Nottingham Forest attack. He's priced at 6.5 million. He offers great value. He might not be the best pick in terms of goal threat, but I think Gibbs White is a solid choice in this position. It's only a matter of time before Alejandro Garnacho returns to the Man United squad. He scored in the FA Cup final against Manchester City and started one game in the Copa America against Peru, and for both tournaments he ended up lifting the trophy. He's priced at 6.5 million, so it has been quite a significant rise from 5 million last season, and he's owned by 11.6% of the game. He got 7 goals and 7 assists, but I'm expecting him to better these numbers and possibly get to double digits in terms of goals. I don't think he'll do that for assists, but it's still a possibility, and he took 100 shots in the last campaign. Good opening fixtures for Man United, but their main issue is the amount of injuries they have. Euro is possibly out for 3 months. Rasmus Højlund is also set to miss 6 weeks worth of action, so that's going to be a big concern. But Garnacho should be nailed on for the beginning of the campaign. We could see rotation later in the season, but he should still start the vast majority of Premier League matches, and I think he'll better the 131 points he got in FPL last season. At number 15, I've gone for Rodri, who won Player of the Tournament at the Euros. I think Dani Olmo and Fabian Ruiz were even better, but no one can deny how good Rodri is for both club and country. He is the most important player for Spain and Manchester City. He's priced at 6.5 million, and he's always overlooked in FPL because you've got viable alternatives from the same club in the midfield like Foden and De Bruyne, and you've also got so many options at 6.5 million who are more attack-minded. They might play as a winger or an attacking midfielder, but Rodri still gets some very healthy numbers. 8 goals and 10 fantasy assists in the last Premier League season, with 19 bonus points and 159 FPL points overall. Man City have a tough opening game on paper against Chelsea away, but then Ipswich at home, West Ham away and Brentford at home. I think Rodri could easily score in all of those games, and in fact he's a big game player. He has scored against big clubs on multiple occasions, and also in these finals and semi-finals he's a clutch player for Manchester City, so I think Rodri is definitely worth considering for your FPL team. Having said all of that, there are 6.5 million midfielders I prefer, and Kudus is one of them. He can play on the wings, also as a false 9 at times. He did it for Ajax, and just behind the striker as a sort of second striker, if you will. And he's priced at 6.5 million, owned by around 10% of the game. He had an impressive debut campaign for West Ham with 8 goals and 9 fantasy assists. 67 shots was the key stat. I think the other underlying numbers aren't particularly great, but Kudus is a quality player, a decent finisher to say the least. You saw that goal against Man City at the Etihad in Game Week 38 last season, and he faces them in Game Week 3 this time round. And despite Aston Villa, Crystal Palace and Fulham not being favoured on the FDR, I think Kudus can score or assist against all of those clubs with relative ease. He also has 137 points from the last campaign, and he scored in the recent friendly, a 3-1 defeat against Wolves. So Kudus is ready for this new season. There's only one West Ham midfielder I prefer, but with that 1 million difference in price tag between those two, you could argue Kudus offers even better value than Bowen. Kevin De Bruyne has gone down in price to 9.5 million, which makes him very appealing, and I think he could be owned in bursts, but I wouldn't recommend him as a long-term option because he can't stay fit, and even when he is fit, his minutes are extensively managed by Pep Guardiola, so he's not someone I'd recommend having from start to finish, and Phil Foden is a far more reliable pick at the same price. He got 4 goals and 10 FPL assists last season, despite missing the vast majority of the campaign. 59 key passes is very impressive considering the limited starts, and 98 FPL points. We all know how good Kevin De Bruyne is. Another big game player for Manchester City, but he is aging and he hasn't returned from the Euros yet, but he should do in just a matter of days, and De Bruyne would be a good option to start the season, but he's not going to be the most nailed-on option or the most reliable for Manchester City. Mbeumo is an excellent choice in the midfield with a 7 million price tag, and he could be on penalties if Ivan Toney leaves the club, and whenever Toney is on the pitch, Mbeumo is next in line for penalty duties. He's got 7% ownership, 9 goals and 7 assists last season with 17 big chances, good underlying numbers especially for his price, and 127 FPL points. The big issue is the fixtures in Game Weeks 2 and 4 against Liverpool and Manchester City away, but he can definitely do something against Liverpool and against Crystal Palace and Southampton. those are great fixtures to kickstart Brentford's season. So those are the two games you're really looking at where Mbeumo can deliver, and in certain games away from home on the counter-attack, Mbeumo is lethal. He's also been very impressive in pre-season, scoring against Wimbledon in a 5-2 victory and also against Benfica in a 1-1 draw. So keep an eye out for Mbeumo. He is a great choice in the midfield and he's my favourite Brentford asset overall. Another midfielder at a similar price tag who should be second in command for penalties is Nkuku, who has scored in every single game during pre-season. In a 2-2 draw against Wrexham, he scored from open play, and in a 4-1 defeat against Celtic, he scored a late consolation goal from the penalty spot, and yet another penalty against Club America in a 3-0 win for Chelsea. So Nkuku could offer game-breaking value at 6.5 million. Perhaps not to the same extent as Cole Palmer last season, but Nkuku can be a revelation this time round, and his ownership is only increasing, and right now it's roughly 16.1%. He got 3 goals in the last campaign in limited minutes, 4 bonus points as well, and 29 FPL points. He's got some very good stats throughout his Premier League career, which I discussed in other videos and podcasts too. Game week 1 doesn't look great against Manchester City, but between game weeks 2 to 8, Chelsea are right up there in the fixture difficulty rating, as they have some very good games on paper. So keep an eye out for Nkuku. If you don't go for Cole Palmer, I'd highly recommend the Frenchman in the midfield. The first template pick comes in at number 10, and Eze is owned by 33% of all FPL managers despite the price increase to 7 million this time round, with 11 goals and 5 assists in the previous season and 83 shots in just 24 starts. Oliver Glasner's done a great job at Crystal Palace so far, but you could argue there was a manager bounce and we might not see that go into this season. There could be some struggles there. We might need to temper our expectations, and also the departure of Elise could spell trouble for Eze and Mateta. They might still perform very well, and I expect them to, but we could see a drop in their performances or in terms of the number of double-digit hauls they produce. So just be careful with that. But I still think Eze can get close to 200 FPL points this season if he can stay fit and start over 30 Premier League matches. There are some excellent fixtures for Crystal Palace to kickstart this campaign, especially in game weeks 1, 2 and 4. Game week 3 doesn't look particularly great against Chelsea, but Eze can deliver at Stamford Bridge. Anthony Gordon was criminally underutilised at the Euros, but for Newcastle he starts every single week, and we could see him coexisting with Harvey Barnes, and both of them provide excellent options in the Newcastle midfield. The same goes for Bruno Guimaraes, who plays in a deeper position, so like Rodri, he will be overlooked, but Newcastle boasts plenty of options in every single position, and Anthony Gordon is owned by 36% of all FPL managers. The opening 4 game weeks look fantastic. Even Tottenham at home, which isn't marked that favourably by the FDR, Newcastle have a great record against Tottenham Hotspur. In the last 2 home games, they've scored 10 goals past them, so Anthony Gordon is an excellent choice in game week 3. I'd start him in most games anyway, particularly at St James's Park. I think there will be a slight regression in terms of his home numbers because he only blanked twice at home last season, so I think there'll be a few more blanks this time round, but he should still be quite consistent, and what you're hoping from Anthony Gordon is more consistency away from home. He took 81 shots, got 183 FPL points. He produced fantastic numbers all round, and I expect him to be one of the best midfielders in FPL once again. Over the course of this season, I might swap Bowen and Kudus in my pecking order because of the value they offer. Kudus comes in at 1 million cheaper, and that could be the defining factor between those two. But Bowen is still a very underrated option. He's so consistent for West Ham. He delivered 182 points last season, which most people don't really recognise. He got 23 big chances, 16 goals and 6 fantasy assists, very low ownership at 7.4%. I think the opening fixtures are enough to put you off Jarrod Bowen or even Kudus for that matter, but I still think a West Ham midfielder could pay off, especially when their fixtures turn later in this campaign. So keep an eye out for Bowen. He is still an excellent choice, and I'd rank him slightly higher than Anthony Gordon and Eze, but that could certainly change in a couple of weeks. Martin Odegaard has featured in every single preseason game so far against Bournemouth, Man United and Liverpool, and he hasn't produced a single goal or assist, but he did create the chance for Kai Havertz, which he tucked away. That would have counted as an assist in FPL, and he's always consistent with his creativity. Over 100 chances created and 17 big chances created last season, 11 assists, but I do think he's a bit hard done by because the finishes in front of him just aren't lethal enough to really produce the numbers that Odegaard deserves in the assist department, but he did get 186 FPL points regardless, and in the season before last, he got over 200 FPL points, so he's certainly capable of some massive numbers. I don't think he'll be far off the highest scoring midfielder in FPL this season. I don't think he'll be top, but he won't be far off, and the opening fixtures aren't great for Arsenal. Up until Game Week 12, you could argue. Then you can see a favourable run there for the Gunners, and there are some good spells here and there, like Game Weeks 5 to 8. It looks quite promising there, and Arsenal can still deliver against Aston Villa and Tottenham away, but it will be tough, and they did struggle in both matches last season, particularly Aston Villa, so it's not going to be easy, and Arsenal might struggle in certain games and not get off to the same start as they did in the previous two campaigns. Number 5 goes to Bruno Fernandes, who is priced at 8.5 million, just like Martin Odegaard. Despite not producing the same numbers in FPL points for the last 2 seasons as the Norwegian, I still think Bruno Fernandes can outscore him this time round. He had an excellent end to the last campaign. He also got an assist in the FA Cup final against Manchester City, and the opening fixtures are very promising for the Red Devils, but the injury crisis is very concerning, and that could cause some big problems. Bruno Fernandes might have to play deeper if some other injuries happen in the midfield, but Fernandes still got some good numbers last season with 10 goals and 9 fantasy assists and 114 key passes, which was more than any other player in the Premier League. So he hasn't featured yet in pre-season. He's going to return very soon after his duties with Portugal at the Euros, reaching the quarterfinals, and he's probably Man United's best asset overall. Heung-min Son has been on fire recently with 3 goals in the last 2 friendly games against Vissel Kobe and the K-League All-Stars, and he got good numbers last season with 17 goals and 10 assists, and even better underlying stats than ever before with 20 big chances and 20 big chances created. He's an excellent option for the first 2 game weeks against Leicester and Everton, but then against Newcastle and Arsenal, you'd probably want to avoid Son and most Spurs assets, particularly defenders, and Son is fixture-proof to be fair, but Newcastle away is a very tough game for Spurs in the last couple of years, and if that trend continues, you'd probably want to sell Son in Game Week 3 to a Cole Palmer, Saka, Phil Foden or somebody else around that price tag. Son also got over 200 FPL points last season, and his ownership is only increasing after the goals he's scoring in the latest friendlies. It's now 11.3% despite the 10 million price tag, which has gone up from last season, but Heung-min Son is still one of the very best midfielders. Ranking the top 5 is very difficult, but Phil Foden comes in at number 4 and he's underpriced at 9.5 million with 30.2% ownership. That has steadily decreased in the last couple of weeks. He got 19 goals and 8 fantasy assists to win the Premier League Player of the Season award, and he took over 100 shots, got 230 points. Only Cole Palmer scored more. Game Week 1 looks difficult on paper against Chelsea. It was a 4-4 thriller last season and we could see plenty of goals yet again. Both Chelsea and Man City have been very shaky in pre-season, particularly Man City, but the likes of Phil Foden haven't featured, so things are going to change drastically by the time we get to Game Week 1, and Phil Foden is probably the second best Man City asset, only behind Erling Haaland. Bukayo Saka has produced double digits in goals and assists in 2 consecutive Premier League seasons, and he got 226 FPL points, so he is very impressive with his underlying numbers, 91 key passes, 108 shots. He is a great option in the midfield, and he's still the best Arsenal asset overall, although their defenders also offer great value there. Martin Odegaard, Martinelli, Declan Rice, and also Kai Havertz are great options too, but I think Saka stands out, and he's the one who's capable of getting 200 points every single year, and I'm expecting him to do the same thing this time round. Can he get to 20 plus goals? It's a possibility, but I think Saka is also a very underrated creator, and we could see a 15 plus goals and assist season this time round, and he could get to 230 or 240 FPL points. But the opening portion of this season doesn't look great for the Gunners, but it's still not enough for me to not recommend Bukayo Saka, who comes in at number 3 in the best midfielders list. Despite being the highest scoring player in FPL last season, Cole Palmer comes in at number 2, and he has seen the biggest increase ever in terms of price, from 5 million to 10.5 million. An increase of 5.5 is simply ridiculous, but it was warranted with 22 goals and 13 fantasy assists. His ownership has gone down a little bit to 52.2%. Only Isak and Watkins have higher ownership though. 32 bonus points, 244 FPL points overall. He could get to similar numbers once again, but if I'm being honest, I don't think Chelsea will get as many penalties this season. They'll still get plenty, between 5 to 10 in my opinion, but I don't think they'll get as many as they did in the last campaign, which enabled Palmer to get 22 goals. So I think 15 plus goals is realistic, and also maybe 15 plus plus assists as well. He was also very impressive in the Euros, scoring in the final in that 2-1 defeat against Spain. Man City looks tough in game week 1 and Chelsea are likely going to lose that match, but they still got a chance considering it's a home fixture, and game weeks 2 to 8 look incredible for the Blues. The best midfielder in Fantasy Premier League this season will likely be Mohamed Salah once again. It's a very close call between him, Palmer, Foden, Saka and possibly Heung-min Son. I expect all 5 of them to get over 200 FPL points, and Salah doesn't offer as good value as the others because they come in significantly cheaper, but Salah will probably get over 20 goals, I think over 10 assists. His underlying numbers are always fantastic and the opening fixtures are great to say the least. So to start the season, I think Salah is definitely the best option. Then as we get deeper into the competition, you could argue Salah goes down to 2nd or 3rd, especially in terms of value. But in game week 1, I don't see anybody better than Salah, and that doesn't just go for midfielders, it goes for every single position in Fantasy Premier League. That concludes the top 20 midfielders in FPL for the upcoming season, and Draft Town have a very similar ranking for the top 5. They've got Salah, Palmer, Foden, Son and Odegaard instead of Saka, but it's very similar with Salah and Palmer occupying the top 2 spots. How would you rank the best midfielders in FPL? Which ones are you going for, and who are you captain in game week 1? I think Salah against Ipswich Town offers a tremendous option, and it's very difficult to beat that even in the forward positions with the likes of Isak and Erling Haaland. Thank you very much for watching this video and listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it or found it useful, then be sure to smash the like button and subscribe for new. Let's get this video to over 200 likes and let's keep on pushing towards new goals like 30,000 subscribers. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram, DylanRCM, and check all the other links in the description below for my Patreon and the championships for early access to my videos, amongst many other perks. The Discord server, FPL League, Draft Town, which is a very useful resource that I'll refer to throughout this season, and also Spotify. Leave a 5-star review on my podcast. It'd go a long way to supporting my channel. Keep your eyes peeled for more content, rating your team's videos, and I'll keep you updated onto how you can submit your teams, and there could be a live stream as well, the best budget players, differentials. But up next will be the best forwards, and it will be a top 15 this time round.